Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Malu Dumim in Israel. The war in Gaza is now solidly into its third month, with no clear sign of an ending. The Israeli army is slowly grinding its way into southern Gaza, pushing the population there into an ever-shrinking area near the Egyptian border. The goal is clear: to finish off Hamas. What will happen with the massive population there is unclear. It is equally unclear what will happen to the Gaza Strip itself. Will it remain in Israel's hands, or will it go back to the Palestinians? Or will it have some third destiny that is still unknown? These questions occupy the minds of Israelis every hour of the day. Presumably, they are of even greater concern to the Gazans. The intention of the world on this war is slowly abating, as there are other things that are becoming more interesting. Nevertheless, there is still the daily concern for the welfare of the innocent civilians, voiced by somebody somewhere. Frequently, these speeches seem a bit obligatory, meant more for domestic ears than to actually make any difference in the lives of the people involved. Israel, for its part, is doing what it has to do, defeating the enemy, suffering through the daily news of more of its precious soldiers dying in battle, and helplessly worrying about the fate of the remaining hostages still held captive somewhere in Gaza. Throughout all of this, there rides an almost silent current in Israel that all of this could have been avoided if the people in charge had read the signs properly before it all started. Apparently, the plans of the Hamas invasion were known in some manner, but were ignored as either irrelevant or inconsequential. This huge error on the part of certain higher-ups in the Israeli military intelligence looms as one of the greatest failures in Israeli history. It occasionally creeps into the news, but the general feeling is that all of this will have to be dealt with later, after the war is over. Assuming this ever happens, it will be a major political battle, with certain heads rolling and others surviving through the upheaval. Behind all of this lurks the unspoken suspicion of some sort of sabotage. This dreaded word is hardly heard in Israel, but it has crossed the mind of almost everyone. What went wrong? Why didn't they read the signs correctly? Looking towards the future, will the current signs be read correctly, or will they also be misinterpreted or ignored? The fate of Israel and Gaza rests on these questions. For those of us who live in the middle of this, or at least are directly affected by it all, these questions are in every discussion. They are more important than our finances or even our health. Yet most of us have the unsettling feeling that they are entirely out of our hands. We can only hope that those in whose hands the crucial decisions lie will read the signs correctly and make the appropriate moves to ensure that things work out the way that we want. This is a frustrating feeling, knowing that matters which will possibly affect the rest of our lives are in the hands of others who may have already made mistakes. But this is the way things are throughout life. We have only so much control over what happens to us, and the rest is beyond our reach. We sometimes have signs revealed to us that may guide us on the proper path, but all too often we find that we either have no idea what to do or are powerless to do anything about it anyway. It is only in relatively rare moments or events that the signs can be read clearly and we are able to act accordingly. These signs can take many forms. They may be in the form of clear advice from a friend. They may be a hunch that enters the mind. They may come from reading the news or staying up on the latest economic trends. They could be displayed in a blood test or blurted out in a chance conversation. They could even be revealed in a dream. This week's Parsha is called Miketz. That word means at the end of, an introduction to the phrase at the end of 2 years. This was the period between the time Joseph had correctly interpreted the dreams of his fellow prisoners in last week's Parsha and the beginning events of this week's Parsha. Joseph interpreted his cellmate's dreams to read that one, the royal cupbearer, would be restored to his previous post, and the other, the royal baker, would be beheaded for his crimes. Such was indeed the outcome, but the cupbearer promptly forgot about Joseph when he regained his position. The Parsha begins with Pharaoh, who had absolute power over everything in Egypt, dreaming a couple of disturbing dreams. These famous dreams show 7 healthy stalks of grain and 7 healthy cows being consumed by an equal number of weak and famished counterparts. Pharaoh awakens from these dreams quite disturbed and hoping to hear an interpretation that will settle his mind. Whatever his advisors told him did not satisfy his anxiety. At this point, the cupbearer re-enters the picture and tells Pharaoh that with him in jail was a Hebrew slave who had correctly interpreted both his dream and that of the former baker. Joseph is rushed out of jail and placed before Pharaoh. Joseph tells him that, quote, only God can bring peace to Pharaoh. With this strange introductory statement, Pharaoh tells Joseph his dreams. Joseph then presents a stunning interpretation. He explains that the cows and the grains represent years, and with the healthy ones indicating 7 years of plenty, and the weak ones indicating 7 years of famine. The famine will be so severe that the good years will be totally forgotten. The fact that the dream was repeated in slightly different but similar imagery indicates that this course of events is about to take place in the immediate future. There was no time to waste. Pharaoh is instantly struck by the accuracy of this interpretation and has Joseph appointed in charge of all advanced preparations for the imminent famine. Joseph institutes a program of storing food in secure locations so that it will be available for the years of famine. Then the famine comes and Egypt is fully prepared for its severity. The surrounding lands, including neighboring Canaan, where Joseph's family lives, are not. Jacob instructs his sons to journey to Egypt to buy grain so that they will be able to survive the famine. So Jacob's sons travel to Egypt and are unknowingly spotted by Joseph, who then accuses them of being spies. While all this is obviously false and trumped up nonsense, they are helpless to do anything about it. Joseph tells them that they can only rectify their reputations by bringing their youngest brother, Benjamin, back with them to Egypt. Jacob is reluctant to part with Benjamin, but eventually agrees. When they return with Benjamin, the brothers are first treated royally and with great honor. But the parsha ends with Joseph arranging a frame-up of Benjamin stealing a precious royal garment. The brothers try to defend Benjamin from this false accusation, but are again powerless to do anything about it, as the evidence is right there in his sack. The resolution of this drama comes in next week's Parsha, with Joseph revealing himself to his brothers and forgiving them for their act of selling him as a slave. This in turn leads to Jacob and his entire household moving to Egypt to be supported by Joseph in the land of Goshen. This, of course, is the prelude to the period of Israelite servitude in Egypt, which would ultimately result in the Exodus, the central story of the Torah. It all came about by the fortuitous reading of those dreams. If we think about it, this whole sequence of events is almost beyond belief. Why did Pharaoh instantly seize upon Joseph's interpretation of his dreams and restructure the entire economy of Egypt to prepare for this unlikely famine? Why didn't he reject this as total nonsense, nothing more than the fantasies of a random dream? Why would anybody today possibly expect that such consequential matters could come about by nothing more than a couple of weird dreams and a pretty decent interpretation of what they meant? None of this really makes any sense at all. We can only imagine ourselves there at the time, living through the years of plenty, wondering why there are all these crazy rules about storing grain and all these unnecessary advanced preparations for a famine that might not come about. Why did anybody believe any of this was going to happen 7 years in advance of when it did? The answer to these questions is a combination of the perceived power of dreams in ancient society, the absolute power of the Pharaoh in ancient Egypt, the wisdom of Joseph in reading all the signs and guiding things so that their message was correctly acted upon, and a firm recognition of the power of fate in the lives of all involved. All of these played a role in the highly unlikely sequence of events, which ultimately resulted in the story of the Exodus. Today, it is virtually impossible for this to have taken place, when none of the required ingredients would be there. Dreams are nothing more than the memory going wild. Absolute power may still be there in certain places, but it no longer wields the same influence. Reading signs and acting upon them is still done, but it is nowhere near as conclusive as was the case with Joseph. Fate is now looked upon as a relic of ancient myths. It is no longer perceived to play a significant part in our lives. But this was how things were decided in the Bible. It was the reading of those signs that was the crucial link in everything. If that had been done differently, perhaps the Exodus never would have happened. It was not easy to read those signs. The story makes it seem obvious in hindsight, but who knows what kind of pressure Joseph was under. The signs were there, but the right person in the right state of mind was necessary to read them. Even with that, those in power had to act upon this prophetic insight in the right way. This was a case in which everything worked out. Usually, today, we are not so fortunate. We are here today in Israel with clear and vague signs of the way things should go. We have leaders who may or may not read those signs correctly and act accordingly. Some of these things may be out of the hands of the leaders themselves and left to an uncertain fate that is greater than all of us. We can only hope that whatever signs are out there are discerned with wisdom and that we are able to navigate the right path through them. It is important to remember through all of this that in the end, only God can bring peace to Israel and to this region. Shabbat Shalom.